So here is a cauliflower, and you can see that there are some speckles on it that we are going to have to take care of, but don't let that fool you about a cauliflower. It doesn't mean you have to throw the whole thing away. A lot of these blemishes are bruising, and also they can be trimmed away. They don't go too deep. What we will have to do is trim away all the core and the stem, so that's what I'm going to show you now. So we're going to take away all these extra leaves as best you can. And you want to expose the core. You can see it in there. And then with a sharp knife and holding those cores back, you're going to, with the tip of the knife, go straight in and then sort of pop the whole thing apart. And you can move your knife around a little bit. Okay, so now we've broken open the cauliflower. You can see some of it still left on here. So we're just going to take these little cauliflower florets off. All right, so now we have our head of cauliflower, but we need to break it into florets. I'm going to use this cauliflower for baked potatoes with cheese sauce, and I'm going to mix cauliflower and broccoli into it. So I'm going to show you how to cut it into bite-sized pieces and also trim off all these blemishes. I'm only going to use half the head because I'm going to use a piece of broccoli as well. So I'm going to go ahead and trim off what I want from here. We like cauliflower in our family, so I'll make a fair amount. Cauliflower and cheese is one of the best combinations. So we have our cauliflower here. I'm going to trim off all these blemishes first before I cut it into pieces that we want to eat. And it'll make a little bit of a mess. It'll look like cauliflower rice, like you've been to a wedding and there's confetti on the floor. We're going to trim all this off. You don't have to go that deep. You can see it's not really, it's just a surface blemish, so don't be put off by it. It's just where it sort of sat and banged against things while it's been shipped. White fruits and vegetables, that tends to happen a fair amount. You tend to see the bruising pretty quick. All right, you can see I've taken off all of the blemishes on our cauliflower. I'm just going to use, this is a bowl scraper. They're one of the best things you can have in a kitchen to just help clean up messes. So I'm going to scoop everything up. I'm putting all of this stuff in my waste bowl. Don't think I'm just dumping it somewhere. I'm putting it all in a waste bowl. And then I'm going to show you how to cut the florets. So what you want to do is find, I always think of them as branches of trees. So you sort of go between the branches and you cut down the stalk of the cauliflower. This is the part that's going to take the longest to cook, so you want to make sure it's sort of thin. And then the consideration you want to take here is how big of a bite do you want when you're cutting up your veggies? I don't want a huge bite of cauliflower. I want a nice bite that fits on the end of a fork. So I don't want to cut it too big, but I also don't want it to break down entirely. So I'm definitely going to keep my eye on how big these little florets get, or how small, because if they're too small, they just disintegrate. So I'm going to go ahead and chop up all these cauliflowers. You can see that all the branches are getting cut up into little bite-sized pieces. So I'll finish that and show you the end product. So I've got most of the cauliflower cut up. I just want to show you a couple more times that you go down the length of the stalk of the cauliflower. Think of it as the trunk and the tree branches, and then cut it into bite-sized pieces. Remember, you don't want it too big. What's nice about cauliflower is that it tends to split apart pretty easily, so you can just break things apart as well. Unlike broccoli, which you'll see is a little bit tougher. It doesn't quite break apart that easily. So there we have all our cauliflower, and now I'll show you how to do the broccoli. It's very similar. Right here we have what's called a crown of broccoli. Oftentimes the actual stem is much longer, but they trim that away and they just sell the crown. So I'm going to show you where to pick all the leaves off. They're not bad for you. You could certainly keep them on there. And what you want to look for is a crown of broccoli where the head of it is, these little florets in here are tightly packed. They're dark green. You can see that this was in my fridge for a little bit. It's just starting to yellow, and that's a sign of older broccoli. In this case, it's pretty slight. So is not so bad. But it does get sort of funkier the older it gets, so just bear that in mind. Younger broccoli that doesn't have all that will be much sweeter. And so you can see, just like with the cauliflower, we've got all of these branches and all these sort of tree stems. So we're going to start by cutting all this apart and then trimming it to the size we want. So you're going to take your cauliflower on its flat side using that claw technique, and we're going to cut off sort of where all the branches meet. And we're going to start pulling them off as best we can. And I don't want you to throw away all this part. Just because it's the stem doesn't mean it's not still good. You can cut those pieces up and use them and eat them. They're delicious. I threw away this part because the bigger it gets, the tougher it tends to get. So you don't necessarily want the bigger part of the stem. It can be a little tough. So we're going to trim our broccoli to about the same size, bite-sized pieces that we did our cauliflower, and just chop them up. It really depends on you and how you like it. This is the same thing you would do if you were going to make broccoli cheddar soup, except you might cut it even smaller so you can puree it more easily. So just finish up here. And if you're making this for, baked potato like I am today, you can certainly just use all broccoli if you don't like cauliflower, or vice versa. I'm using a combination because I have both, so that's what I'll use, and I like both. I like both of them with cheese. So we're going to put them all together. So here is our cauliflower. We're going to put our broccoli right in with our cauliflower. And then we're going to steam our broccoli. So I'm going to show you what tool we're going to use for that. This is a double boiler. There's often a third pot, which I do have, that doesn't have little holes in it like this one does. But when we want to steam something, this acts as a steamer basket. It sits inside the other pot. It has a little lip on there that sits it on there. And I put about 2 inches of water in here. It's not salted. You don't have to salt it. About 2 inches of water in there. You don't need a ton because we want to bring this water to a boil pretty quickly. Because what we're going to do is put our broccoli and cauliflower in the steaming basket. And we're going to bring the water underneath to a boil with a lid on. You absolutely have to keep a lid on your steamer basket, because if you don't trap the steam, all the water will boil away and the vegetables will still be raw. So you need to trap the steam, and that is what cooks the vegetables. This is a great way to cook vegetables while maintaining all of their nutrients, because nothing is lost to the water. We have water-soluble vitamins that could get lost to the water, and they stay intact when they're steamed, or at least there's minimal loss. So that is how we are going to steam our broccoli and cauliflower for our cheese sauce and our baked potatoes. Here you can see our final product. This is our steamed broccoli and cauliflower. And you want it to be fork tender. You don't want it to be knife tender, because you want to be able to get your fork in there. So what I do is I have this all ready to go for my cheese sauce. I'm going to leave the lid off and let it cool. You could blanch it, put it in a cold water bath or ice bath to stop the cooking process, but we're going to eat soon enough. So I'm just going to leave this with the lid off. And the reason I'm keeping the lid off is that the steam will get trapped in there if I put the lid back on. So I want to make sure there's no heat getting trapped in there, because that will overcook our veggies, and we don't want mushy veggies in our cheese sauce. So there you go. Steamed cauliflower and broccoli florets.